and welcome to a new episode of Trance Sign Monday. Today we are going to be creating a really rough lead. This lead honestly will not be used for any kind of uplifting trance. It will mainly be used for some trouts, which is trance and house put together, or really just when you really need like a fierce type of lead in your trance sign. So today we're going to be focusing on the Ferry Corsten kind of Husman type of trance lead. So if you're looking for something fierce, today we're going to be learning how to create that fierce lead that you hear in a lot of trance songs. Okay, so today we're going to be using a mellomantic type of oscillator, which is, I believe it's a digital type of wave, and we're going to be using a normal square wave. Whenever you hear those fierce leads, like in Orjan Nilsen's old productions, like Between the Rays, Ferry Corsten, some of Ferry Corsten's tracks, also I know someone, I forgot who was it, Ram or DNS, created a song called Beyond Time, and they used a really fierce lead for the breakdown. It's always a square lead that's going to be doing it. It's either square or saw, but technically they always go with squares because squares sound more melodic and they have a little bit more harmony to them. Okay, so today we're going to be creating this lead. So that's going to be the lead we're going to be creating. This is going to be one of those more advanced type of leads, but I'm assuming a lot of you guys are looking to learn a lot of sound design, so we're going to really get into this one, okay? Okay, so we're going to be calling this just the Husman Ferry Corsten lead, which is going to be driven by a square and saw one wave, okay? Okay, so for oscillator one, we're going to be using a mellomantic wave, which is digital. Pretty much what digital means is just the type of wave that's being used is just a digital type. Compared to like the square, which is the saw, and then the analog type, which were pretty big in like, you know, hardware synthesizers. And each one just has a different type of shape. I know a lot of you guys maybe watch Sadowic's tutorials, and he shows you guys a spectrogram or something that shows how the waves are looking. I really don't like looking at this stuff. I mean, it's nice to know how the wave's looking, but that's more for those fanatics that are into like synths and sound design, like to that extent. For me, like I really like I feel like a lot of people aren't going to be able to tell the difference whether massive saw is different from silent saw and so on and forth. So whatever you have, just make best use of it. Massive and silent one can be really you know, you can pretty much do everything I'm doing here on silent one, but silent one's going to have its own sound, which is going to be very distinct, but the people hearing, the audience isn't really going to know like, oh, that's silent one or that's virus. And even then, a lot of sound producers don't even know the difference between the virus and characteristics, how like its character compared to the massive and silent one. So really don't worry about that stuff. Okay, so we're going to have a mellomantic wave, -12 pitch, so this is going to be kind of like the lower octave of it, and we're going to be using some distortion to change the mellomantic into kind of more of a fierce lead. Because if you put the mellomantic on right now and you put -12, you change the wave to a position all the way to the left, it's going to sound a little bit mellow, smooth, intensity up, and then amp up. So yeah, so we're going to be routing this all the way to filter 1. Next we go to oscillator 2. We're going to be putting a square and saw 1 wave. It's one of the basic ones. We're going to move it all the way to the left. We're going to leave the pitch at 0.00, and on this one we're going to lower the amp a little, because higher sounds, higher frequency sounds can be heard at higher volumes, so really there's no need for this to be up. So we're going to put this at 11 o'clock, intensity up, and wave to all the way to the left, so we have that square. And we're going to be rounding this to filter 2, and this to filter 1. The reason for mellomantic to filter 1 is because it's already going to be distorted, and it's going to really sound fierce with the distortion we're going to be applying. So we really don't need a scream filter to distort it more. So the square is going to be sent to filter 2 for a little bit more of distortion. So once we have that, route that all the way to filter 2. Now we're going to get into the modulation oscillator. Now here we're going to be applying a couple of macros later on if you want some FM type modulation to your sound, which sounds really futuristic, but it's not required. But you do want to have it right now like this to get that sound that I have right now. So the ring mod is going to be set to oscillator 1, which then this is the way we're going to start making mellomantic fierce. So here we have the ring mod at 1. We're going to put the RM at 8 o'clock. And we're going to put this pitch at 12. Next, we're going to go into phase. We're going to route this to oscillator 2, and we're going to leave it all the way down. This is going to have a macro in the end of the tutorial. Position 1, we're going to have to set to 1, and again, going to be changed at the end of the tutorial. Filter FM, same thing. Okay. Once we have that, now we go into the feedback, and we're going to be feeding the sound into this amp, which is going to pretty much create some type of feedback. And this is how you're going to get the sound to get a little bit more fierce. So we're going to put the amp to around 10 o'clock, and that's where it's going to stay at forever, okay? Next, we're going to be putting, I believe it's a sine shaper type wave, and the mellomantic wave is kind of like a sine wave in a way. It has the same characteristics as a sine, so I'm assuming it's going to look the same as a sine. So generally what the sine shaper does, it changes the way the sine looks, and it adds a lot of drive to it, and what that's going to do is it's going to make the sine sound more like a bass, more like a saw. I'm sure many of you have gotten a saw, lowered it down to 12 octaves, and it sounds juicy, and it can be a great bass line, and it's used a lot in, you know, progressive trance and all that. But it's also a neat effect to get the sine shaper and change your sine into that type, because it kind of gives it a different feel to it, and it's a way you can kind of sound a little bit more different than the top guys. So here we have the sine shaper, and we're going to pretty much put the drive weight up all the way and the drive all the way up, okay? Next, we're going to be going into insert 2, and we're going to put a delay and hold, I believe. Sorry, a sample. I think it's a simple delay. Sorry about that. And we're going to leave the drying width all the way down and the time set to 3 o'clock, which is going to create control the delay. We're going to be putting a macro to that later on, so you can change it to how you please. Okay. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into filter 1, and what we are going to do is we are going to put a low pass 2 filter. So this is going to be a low pass 2 type filter, and pretty much it's just how much it's going to be getting rid of. The cutoff is going to be set all the way to the left. We're going to be applying an envelope to that and an LFO as well to kind of add movement to the sound. So don't worry about it. Just make sure the cutoff is all the way to the left. Resonance is going to be set to 10. I've explained in my previous transit sign episodes what resonance is, so I'm not going to explain myself again. Next, in filter 2, we are going to be applying a scream filter, which is a really special type of filter that allows you to use this middle knob here, which is going to pretty much distort the sound as it passes through the filter. Okay, so the cutoff knob is going to be set to around 8 o'clock, and that's where it's going to be left. And the resonance is going to be set a little bit before, like the line after the end over here. Okay, and we're going to put this all the way up and this all the way up. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our mix 1 and mix 2 here. We're going to put it around here, so just make sure it looks the same. I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to do that. Okay, so hopefully you guys got that there. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to go into our envelope 4, which is routed to our amp envelope. And here what we're going to do is we're going to put an attack of 8 o'clock and level all the way up. I'm assuming you know what this is already. I explained what ADSR is in a video and how important it is, so make sure you understand the concept of it. Our decay is going to be set to 2 o'clock, and level is going to be set all the way up. The reason for my decay being at 2 right now, even though it doesn't really matter because my sustain is all the way up, is because we're going to be applying a macro to this just in case you want to get that kind of fierce pluck. So we killed two birds with one stone here. Our release is going to be set to 8 o'clock. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into envelope 1, which is going to be routed to our filters. So for envelope 1, our attack is going to be all the way down, level all the way up, decay all the way up, level all the way down, release to 8 o'clock. And pretty much we're going to drag it underneath our cutoff for filter 1. It's going to look like this. You're going to click and pull all the way up. So we're going to pretty much modulate all the way up, so full value. Next, we're going to go into filter 2, and again, same thing in the middle. You want your filter to one to look like this, so it's the blue part is going to be here. You're going to click, drag it all the way to 3 o'clock here. Okay. So once we have that, now what we can start doing is we can go into LFO 5 and modulate our sound. So LFO, again, like I've explained before, is another way of an envelope, except instead of using the ADSR method, the LFO is going to be keep going on and on and on. So this is one thing I didn't explain in my previous videos, is that with the envelope, when you modulate, when you apply it to a knob and you turn that knob, if you keep holding it, the envelope's not going to keep activating and so forth, okay? So once you press one note, the envelope works, and that's it. With the LFO, however, as long as you keep holding that note, the LFO is going to keep activating. So the best way here is, we have a sine wave, and we're going to be using that. You see how it's like a sine, and if you keep going, it's just continuous. So there's no end to an LFO as long as you you have your button on. So it's a great way to kind of add movement to pads and kind of, you know, create some weird type of pads going on, like changes and everything. So the rate is going to decide how fast the LFO is working, so how fast it's going to be turning the knob. So here we're going to be having an LFO rate at 9 o'clock, and you want your LFO to look like this, the sign. And the reason for this is because if I were to put it like this, pretty much what's going to happen is the LFO is going to work like low, high, and so forth. So we want to start here in the center of a normal value. Okay, so now we get the LFO. We're going to be putting it here. It's going to look like this, sorry. So you're going to click and pull it up to your like around 10 o'clock for filter 1. Now we're going to filter 2. And again, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to pull up till it's at 12 o'clock, okay? So once we have that, now it should look like this. And I believe that's almost all the LFOs. We have nothing else to put on. Okay, so once we have that, now we're going into our voicing section, and we're not really going to do much here. We just got to make sure that our type of voicing is going to be a mono rotate type. So all you're going to be allowed to play is just one note. One note is all you're going to be able to play. So we're going to leave everything the same, the trigger always, and so forth, okay? Next, you're going to oscillator. We're not going to be adding glide to this, but if you were to decide to add glide to it, you could do it here. And pretty much what glide does, it kind of slows the note down as it changes. So if you were to go from a G to a D and you have the time up a lot, you're going to hear the sound kind of, well, I like to call it dumbs down, so it's not as fast as it is. So it gives you that kind of Dutchy feel. So this is where you would do it in the glide section of Massive. Okay. Okay, so just make sure your vibrato is all the way down and the depth as well. We don't want vibrato for the sound. It does not sound good. Okay, so once we have that, pretty much we want to make sure our routing section is the same here. So here we have the oscillator 1. And the routing section is a great way to see how your sounds are going to be traveled. Like when you're a DJ, you have your CDJ, like let's say 2000s, and then you have your mixer, and then the mixer goes through some sort of thing. So here what's going on is pretty much your oscillator 1 is going to go through your inserts, then into a filter, and then again through inserts, and so forth. So how I have it here is it's going to go through filters. So just make sure it looks the same. Most of the time, it's not wise to change anything on here, and most of the time it won't really affect your sound. So just remember, in the routing section, it's just a neat way for you to see how the sound travels through parameters. So just like the sound from the CDJ goes into the mixer, comes out a channel, goes to the master, comes out of the master, goes into the club's compressor and limiter, and then it goes into the stereo. Same thing here. Our master is the last phase here. Okay. So once we have that, now we're going to go into our effects 1, which is going to be a reverb. Our reverb is going to be set to 9 o'clock with the size at 10, density at 11, and the color of the reverb is going to be set to 8. Color just decides, like over here, your white noise, it decides what frequency that reverb is going to be at. Next, we go into dimension expander, which just widens your sound, but it does it with balls, like I've explained before. Dry and wet to 8 o'clock, and the size is going to be set to around 8 o'clock as well, so not that much. Next thing, we go into the EQ, where this is where you kind of bring out a lot of the sounds from your lead. So this is a perfect way to EQ your sound and then go into Ableton and then EQ it into the mix. So this is to EQ it for it to sound as best as possible. And then once you're in Ableton and you put it with everything else, then your EQ from Ableton's gonna pretty much, like, you're gonna EQ it so it fits in the mix, so it's not interfering with anything else. So our frequency is gonna be set to 10 o'clock. Our high shelf is gonna be set to 2, the boost to 2, and the low shelf dead in the center at 12 o'clock. And I've explained what high shelf, low shelf, and all this does already in the previous episodes, okay? Okay, so once we have that, then we should be done with the sound. We just got to make sure there's nothing else missing. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to start applying macros. I've explained what macros are, but just in case I didn't explain that well, macros in Massive are a big thing. And the reason I like them is because they give you a chance to kind of just see it this way. And here you're going to see this. The macro control sections, which I would call the easy control section because you don't have to go into all the parameters and change them. So it's a good way to do it once you know what you're doing with it. And also it's a good way to automate stuff to happen. So you can put your macro 1 on almost all the parameters and have them all go up at the same time to a certain value, which is pretty cool. So what we're going to do here is we're going to get our macro 1. And pretty much what we're going to do is we're going to go into envelope 4. We're going to put this on the decay. And pretty much we're going to just lower it down like this. And then we're going to put it on our level as well. Just lower it down as well. Oops. So click on it and pull back to around here. Let's see if this works. There we go. So pretty much you want your macro here for your decay down to 10. You can put it down to 9 if you wish so. And then your level is going to go down to 12 o'clock here. Let's leave it to 10 o'clock, okay? And you're just going to call that decay, okay? Okay, once we have that, now let's go into the modulation section here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into the phase. We're going to put a macro there. And you want your macro to be at 9 o'clock. Next, we're going to go into the position one. Put it here. Put that one to 8 o'clock. And then you go into filter 1 FM. You're going to put the 2 here as well. And you want that to around 8 o'clock. Okay, and now you can change the sound. Okay, so just call this FM mix. And then you can add it if you desire. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to apply one for our effects as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to put one here and just increase our reverb, our reverb by a bit to around 10 o'clock. And oops, give me a sec. Let's put this one down first. Sorry, let me take it off. Make sure your knobs are always facing down when you're applying your macro, so you have the 3 down all the way. Okay, there we go. And just set it to 10 o'clock. We're going to call this reverb. And also set it to your size. And there we go. So now when you pull this up all the way, this knob is going to be here and this knob's going to be here. But for now, I'm just going to leave it down, okay? Next thing we're going to do is we're going to be putting one on delay as well. So for 4 o'clock here, we're going to put it here. So you want your yellow line to hit around 10 o'clock. And then we're going to put another one to our dimension expander at the same time as well. Just a little bit. And then just a little bit to the size as well. Very little. So now when you turn this knob, you're going to get this one going up in these 2 as well. And we're going to call it effects, okay? So once we have that, the last one we're going to do is we're going to put it here to the Melomantic one. So if you want to change the way it sounds, you can do so. So just call it tone. And that should be it. So guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. This is one of the harder songs to type of sounds to create. There's way harder ones that we'll get into eventually. So hopefully you learned a lot of things in this video. Like you learned how an LFO works compared to an envelope. That one thing is that the envelope activates every time a note is hit, while the LFO is activated as long as the note is being hold. Okay guys. Also Melomantic, now you know what type of wave and how it sounds like, and also now you know how to create those fierce elites. Remember, if you're always trying to find that sound, it's going to be a square, and just make sure it's distorted. In the next episode, we're going to look at squares again, but this time we're going to be using only square waves to create that really fierce melodic lead that a lot of trance producers love to use. Anyways guys, thanks for tuning in. This has been Trance episode 4, I believe, and I hope you guys have a great weekend.